Good evening, everybody. It's a beautiful night out, which means it's a beautiful night for music. Um, I'm Joey Barron, and I have the great honor of being your JLive host tonight. JLive is the Jewish Arts Collaborative series of virtual cultural events that bring us together to explore and celebrate the diverse world of Jewish art, culture, and creative expression. As always at these events, if you have questions during the conversation, please share them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will ask as many questions as time allows. Tonight, we have a very special treat with Donald Berman, acclaimed pianist and chair of keyboard studies at Longy School of Music of Bard College, in performance with violist Mark Berger of Brandeis University and the Lydian String Quartet. So welcome, Don. And let's get started. And can you just tell us about the first piece we'll be hearing?
Sure. Thanks, Joey. The first piece is a short work by Jonathon Leshnoff, who's a living composer. He lives in Baltimore, and it's from his Yiddish Suite, clarinet, viola, and piano. This is a movement just for viola and piano, and it's called Shalom Aleichem.
That was really fabulous, Don. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
It's
he's
not like any other Shalom Aleichem I've ever heard. I can tell you that.
yeah. I don't know what his sources are, but I trust they are.
Okay.
They're
Um, I am curious. You've chosen two pieces tonight by Jewish composers. Um, and I'm going to ask you the question that I frequently get asked is, was Jewish music important to you growing up? And the $1 million question is, what makes a piece of music Jewish?
interesting. I think it was growing up in New York. It was just secular or non-secular. It was ingrained. I was thinking about that question and I was remembering a story a few years ago, several years ago, really. I was working with Mark Morris on his dance company in touring with some performances, and one day I was improvising for the warm-up class, and he stopped the class. He said, "Don, that's the Jewish national anthem. Why are you playing Hatikva?" And I had no idea that I had lapsed into that. And I think it's probably because when I was a kid, I had this box set of Leonard Bernstein light classics with the New York Philharmonic, and I loved the Die Moldau of Smetana, which is the source of the melody for Hatikva. So it's in there. Also, I love creating and developing programs that sort of give a sense of community and give voice to music that's not often heard. Oddly, I got into that through the music of a non-Jewish composer, Charles Ives, whose music is really centered around creating memory and memory of public events, and that sense of just giving voice to public events and a sense of community and justice really got me interested in new music and particularly new voices for audiences to hear. So I've really enjoyed cultivating and curating programs of Jewish composers and all kinds of living and unknown composers.
So when you were starting to learn to play, let's say high school and college, were you playing Jewish composers then, or was this something you came to later?
Not particularly, although I do remember walking into my teacher Mildred Victor's home, and she had a giant button on that said, "I am a Zionist." And I didn't know what that meant at the time, so I had to find out. Her husband was very involved with Jabotinsky and other people. It's a fascinating story, actually. So, when you think of it, I learned a piece by Mendelssohn, who was probably one of the great Jewish composers, even though he converted. And songs without words and music of that nature really is inflected with the music of that region, and certainly Germany and Hungary, where there's Jewish music really got into the DNA of classical music of that Romantic era. So,
which is a beautiful transition to the next piece.
Absolutely.
So why do you tell us about the next piece?
Sure. This is a piece by Andrei Hajdu. This is a composer I learned about from my friend Derek Ramel, who's a composer in New York. Hajdu is very well renowned in Jerusalem, throughout Israel. Very prolific composer, and like Bartok and others, he had some learning pieces that he developed, and he did some transcriptions of music. This is a piece from Moldavia that is sung by the Hasidim, but it's a melody from that part of the world that completely has disappeared from non-liturgical music. It's only known in the Jewish communities of the Hasidim, and it's actually an 18th century melody. I think he said the Carpathian region. So it's called "My Soul is Thirsty of Thee."
Wow, was what I said while I was on mute. It's
Really beautiful.
yeah, it's an interesting thing for me as somebody who's not a musician by any stretch, but just somebody who listens to a lot of things, that the piece reeks of longing. And I'm curious, what are you thinking about when you play it? Are you thinking about longing? Are you just thinking about don't hit the wrong note? What's it like for you to play a piece like that?
Well, definitely when you're preparing a piece like that, you have to access all that emotional territory. I think similar process to an actor, really. But you digest that, and then you get to the part where you just have to execute it. So during the performance, you're just trying to be responsive to what's happening around you, especially when you have, a wonderful player like Mark playing the solo part, and you're responding to one another. So I definitely appreciate it while I'm playing it. But mostly I'm just making sure I play the right notes in the right place.
You got to start there.
Something live with you and
Well,
respond.
Speaking of these composers, we have a question.
Sure.
Besides Leshnoff, who are other contemporary Jewish composers you are fond of that ought to be heard more?
Good question. There's another piece that Mark and I are going to work on by Yotam Haber, and incidentally, there was an article about him in the Times last week, which was really interesting to watch, interesting to read, rather. And that's a gorgeous piece. He's a very interesting composer. There was also an article the other day about an old friend of mine, Osvaldo Goliath, who's just written his first piece in many years using some David Grossman text as the setting. There's a composer. I've been doing some research. There's a composer named Betty Olivero who wrote a piece called Sofim that I'm going to learn. Another really distinguished senior composer in Israel. So there's a lot out there. When we curated a project for the Boston Jewish Music Festival, is called From the Lower East Side to Carnegie Hall, and we went all the way from Ernst Bloch to Schoenfeld. If you don't know his music, cafe music and other pieces is quite a lot of fun. And of course, Yehudi Weiner, who was there, and we played a piece of his called Tanzun Meisela, Dance and Story.
Nice. So before we wrap up, I am curious in terms of both as a teacher and as a musician when you're not a solo performer. What has this time been like for you, and how have you been able to use it?
It's been very intense. Personally, for me, as the concerts peeled off in the spring, I just dove into that one huge project that I'd been putting aside for a long time, and I memorized and performed and did a project recording Charles Ives' Concord Sonata, which is a big 45-minute, very thick piece. But teaching-wise, it's been really a huge adjustment. There's been a lot of, learning of technology, just like everyone else. And I've been thrilled about the teaching we've been able to do, particularly at Longy, who helped co-host this event by recording those pieces in Pickman Hall. I have a class called Music and Politics, and the students just put together a concert for the election eve. And they put together a concert film, and I have students in that class who are in Boston. There's one who lives in Inner Mongolia. There's one who went home to Vietnam. They're all over the world. There's one who lives in Acton. Anyway, seeing the students, they have to be very present when they're online with you. And that's something that I like, and I think they are using this time, if you're in the fortunate circumstance to be able to do it, where you're shutting everything out, not getting distracted, and really being very productive. So in the piano world, it's okay.
You have another comment, I think.
Yeah, sure.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, well, you have greetings from a lifelong friend from third grade, which is Dina Pomerantz.
Oh, yeah.
So she's here watching you, making sure you're not making any mistakes. So we're going to wrap up, and I know you have a little treat to take to play for us after all of the announcements.
Sure.
So, first I have to thank you, and I have to thank Mark. It's really been a beautiful evening of music. And the other people we have to thank, and I know you've mentioned them, but on behalf of JArts, the Longy School of Music of Bard College has really gone out of their way to make this possible, including the staff at Pickman Hall. And I want to just thank all of them. And before we close this, please note that tomorrow night at 7, JArts is presenting a beautiful evening of dramatic readings from the Bintelbrief, the Yiddish advice column in the Forward newspaper, which since 1906 has seemed to address every aspect of the immigrant experience and Jewish assimilation. The staged reading will be followed by a discussion with historian Dr. Jonathon Leshnoff, and this you can still register at jartsboston.org. I also just a couple of other quick things I should mention. Don was very humble about it. Don is one of the country's great authorities on Charles Ives, and I hope everybody recognizes him as such. And last but not least, as the JArts tagline says, let culture connect us. To make this possible, we rely on generous community support like yours. If you enjoyed the JLive series, please consider donating. There should be a link to donate to JArts in the chat. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you all for being here. And let's hear this little last piece for us. So.
This is the closing section of a piece by Scott Wheeler that was written for my wedding. And it quotes a Yiddish tune, Fern die Machatunum Heim, which is escorting the in-laws home.
thank you all. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight, and thank you, Dawn.
Good night.
See you next time.
Thanks.